Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. I trust you had a great weekend. It's been pretty warm here during the day, and we're waiting for some rains. My macro thoughts start with we can essentially pronounce quantitative easing dead as a dodo, I think. And this is my piece from the weekend. Here comes President Trump, and the explanation is contained therein. Donald Trump won the US election, all ends up, and for the first time since 1928 won the presidential vote, the Senate, the House, and will decide the Supreme Court's composition. It is a breathtaking win, especially when you consider that Trump was an insurgent candidate and his Make America Great Again movement, similarly an insurgent movement. Trump confounded the pollsters of the traditional media echo chamber and was ranked a rank outsider at 4-1 in a two-horse race just a few short hours before the final result was known. The result in the US mimicked the Brexit result, and what is clear to me is that we are watching a populist wave or zeitgeist. Some have characterized it as a white lash, which has now swept the United Kingdom and the US and has Italy, where Matteo Renzi has called for a referendum, France, where Marine Le Pen is the most popular politician by a street, and the Netherlands, all in its crosshairs. Comic-turned-politician Beppe Grillo, co-founder of Five Star, said, "This is the deflagration of an epoch. It is the apocalypse of this information system, of the TVs, of the big newspapers, of the intellectuals, of the journalists." And this is another important point. Traditional media has lost its position of control. It's been upended by the internet, which allowed insurgent politics to broadcast over the top. Returning to President-elect Trump, who deployed linguistic warfare with devastating effect, the names he gave his opponents, Crooked Hillary, Lying Ted, Little Marco, Low Energy Jeb, were devastating. The open question now is how many of his campaign promises will he fulfill, and which ones, because on a continuum there are some serious outlier promises. The US stock market slumped by its biggest single-day percentage drop in the pre-market on Wednesday before taking back the entire precipitous fall and closing at a fresh all-time high by the end of the day. The catalyst for that spectacular recovery was Trump's victory speech, which many took to signal a pivot. The speech was conciliatory, and the flavor was captured in comments Trump made when he met with President Obama. Trump had said it was a great honor to meet with President Obama for transition talks at the White House. Mr. Obama said he was encouraged by their excellent and wide-ranging conversation lasting over an hour. Ian Bremmer of Eurasia Group opined that the Trump victory was the most profound domestic political transition of my lifetime. There are three aspects of American leadership that will be affected by the Trump administration and the growing geopolitical recession: the United States' role as a world policeman, architect of global trade, and cheerleader of global values. I am a seller of Ian Bremmer's rather hyperbolic critique. Putting a stop-loss into play with the Syrian rebels or a bunch of ne'er-do-wells and paid mercenaries reaching out to Vladimir Putin indicate a trend change in the way the US engages with the rest of the world strikes me as an entirely sensible mid-course correction. As Trump has indicated, China is the main adversary, and it's difficult to understand why the US was seeking to send Vladimir into Xi Jinping's ready embrace. To triangulate China, the US needs Russia on its side and not on China's. Therefore, I see Trump playing a Ronald Reagan game. From an economic and trade perspective, I expect Trump to be much more aggressive with China. I think the QE quantitative easing consensus is now a busted flush, Remember, a vast swathe of pro-Brexit, pro-Trump camps were the older white folks who have seen their savings evaporate in the world of negative interest rates. This is the point. They want a return on their savings. And Theresa May and Trump get that. The bond markets get it as well. The US 30-year yield surged 32 basis points higher last week, which is the biggest weekly rise in 7 years. There is more to come as the cost of money is normalized. I like the tax-cutting agenda. My theory remains, and interestingly was validated a few years ago in Russia, that when you reduce taxes to a level that folks feel is just and equitable, the tax take surges because it is much more convenient to just pay it. The infrastructure spend is long overdue. Higher interest rates are going to propel a big dollar rally from here on in, and it's only just getting going. Emerging market currencies, which took a big tumble last week, are set to crater, I'm afraid. Let me leave you with a transcript from the Sidney Lumet movie Network in 1976. You've got to watch it. You think you merely stopped a business deal? That is not the case. The Arabs have taken billions of dollars out of this country, and now they must put it back. It is ebb and flow, tide and gravity. It is ecological balance. Put up an image from that movie and a link to The World as a Corporation on YouTube. Do go and have a listen to that. The Dow rose 5.4% last week, marking its best weekly performance since December 2011 after the Trump election. I like this photograph: moon, superlunar, Nice, moonrise, moonlight, Côte d'Azur. And this, I to the Z, is Mungai. I had so much fun shooting these pieces. Be sure to head the Kenya Art Fair today at Sarit and check out works from the Napster and Arungu. I like this work that he's photographed. Motion was a very good friend and a flatmate of my brother's at Harvard, and he's become a tremendous writer. And I found a short story of his on the New Yorker. I'll just give you a few clips. One's relationship to windows changed in the city. A window was the border through which death was possibly likeliest to come. Windows could not stop even the most flagging round of ammunition. Any spot indoors with a view of the outside was a spot potentially in the crossfire. Moreover, a window pane itself could so easily become shrapnel, shattered by a nearby blast, and everyone had heard of someone or other who had bled out after being lacerated by shards of flying glass. The effect doors had on people altered as well. Rumours had begun to circulate of doors that could take you elsewhere, often to places far away, well removed from this death trap of a country. Some people claimed to know people who knew people who had been through such doors. A normal door, they said, could become a special door, and it could happen without warning to any door at all. Most people thought that these rumours to be nonsense, superstitions of the feeble-minded, but most people began to gaze at their doors a little differently, nonetheless. They did not hear the agent approaching, or perhaps he had been there all along, and they were startled by his voice just behind them. The agent spoke softly, almost sweetly, his whisper bringing to mind that of a poet or a psychopath. He instructed them to stand still and not to turn around. He told Nadia to cover her head, and when she asked why, he said it was not a request. Nadia had the sense that he was extremely close to her, as if he were about to touch her neck, but she could not hear his breathing. There was a faint sound in the distance, and she and Syed realized that the agent might not be alone. Syed asked where the door was and where it led to, and the agent replied that the doors were everywhere. But finding one the militants had not yet found, a door not yet guarded, that was the trick. It might take a while. The agent demanded their money, and Syed gave it to them, uncertain whether they were making a down payment or being robbed. The barbaric gleams right under the surface of all human skin. That's Jory Graham. It is something in late life I have come to understand, the hysteria, the sense of the absurd. I like this street art with a message of hope and peace, TED Talks. Political Reflections asked whether he thought his rhetoric had gone too far in the campaign. Mr. Trump responded, "No, I won." Although he wasn't specific, Mr. Trump suggested a shift away from what he said was the current Obama administration policy of attempting to find moderate Syrian opposition groups to support in the civil war there. "I've had an opposite view of many people regarding Syria," he said. He suggested a sharper focus on fighting Islamic State or ISIS in Syria rather than an ousting of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. "My attitude was, you're fighting Syria. Syria's fighting ISIS. And you have to get rid of ISIS. Russia is now totally aligned with Syria. Now you have Iran, which is becoming powerful because of us, is aligned with Syria. Now we're backing rebels against Syria. We have no idea who these people are. If the US attacks Mr. Assad," Mr. Trump said, "we end up fighting Russia, fighting Syria." Barack Obama and Donald Trump can be seen in this photograph from The Independent. Donald Trump has picked Reince Priebus as his chief of staff and Stephen Bannon as his chief strategist. Bannon, of course, is a media provocateur and has been appointed senior counsel and chief West Wing strategist, signaling an embrace of the fringe ideology long advanced by Mr. Bannon and of a continuing disdain for the Republican establishment. Dual appointments, with Mr. Bannon given top billing in the official announcement, instantly created rival centers of power in the Trump White House. Former Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi says comparisons between himself and Donald Trump are obvious. I like this photograph from Remembrance Sunday, Whitehall, 100 years from the song. This is Frank Gardner. The Daily Star is Nigel Farage, set to become most powerful politician in UK after Trump meeting. Donald Trump says he's going to deport up to 3 million undocumented immigrants immediately. Asian leaders race to decode Trump on the future of Obama's pivot. An article published last week by Trump campaign advisors Alexander Gray and Peter Navarro said Obama's policy was talking loudly but carrying a small stick. With the deployment of warships to Singapore and Marines to Darwin, token gestures. Under Trump, the Navy would expand to reassure our allies that the United States remains committed in the long term to its traditional role as guarantor of the liberal order in Asia. The region, of course, boasted 6 of the top 15 US export markets last year, its companies selling everything from power systems to fuel, high-quality foods, financial services. More than $5 trillion in trade passes each year through the South China Sea, of which $1.2 trillion is US-related. So now I've been pointing out about that pivot. Let's see what happens next. Without backing from the US, Britain and France, Merkel is the lone defender of liberalism, says the New York Times. This is why South Korea is a democracy. This is Daniel Tudor. Look at the numbers of people out there. Let's move on to the markets. Let's start with the currency markets. Let's start with the US 10-year yield, which is pushing towards 2.2% now. It's been a huge distinct move, something that I spoke about in September. Currency markets, euro dollar 107.92, dollar index 99.461, nearing my 100 target. Japanese yen 107.55, Swiss franc 0.9913, the pound 125.42, the Aussie 0.7545, India rupee 67.515, South Korean won 1168.47, the Real 339.18, the Egyptian pound 16.6120, and the Rand 1433.88. Japan's third quarter GDP grew 2.2%, beating a 0.8% estimate. Dollar index, have a look at this 3-month chart. I'm looking for my target at the beginning of the year was 100. I'm looking for 110 now. Euro dollar target is parity. Look at the precipitous slump since it struck 113 on the briefly on the news that Trump was winning. Trump managed to cause significant divergences in markets last week. Will Trump make the US dollar great again? Asks Aurelia. I tend to think he will. She's a little bit more skeptical. RBA has further reason not to cut. Check out the hidden stimulus boosting Australia's economy. That's where the strength has come in recently to the Aussie dollar. Let's move on to gold. My goodness, we were just above 1,300 not too long ago. We're now at 1219.20. So we've crashed. Crude oil, $43.93 in New York. That's down as well. Emerging markets, India's cash recall chaos sparks growing backlash. That's the FD. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has roiled India with the shock invalidation of all the country's 500 and 1,000 rupee notes, which account for about 86% of the value of the currency in circulation. In a full-page, front-page newspaper advertisement on Sunday morning, Kotak Mahindra Bank urged middle-class Indians with debit or credit cards to lend a helping hand to those without bank accounts who have been hit hard. Step in and swipe your card for them at a store, or make a digital cash transfer for someone, the ad urged. Together, let's progress towards cashless India. The emerging markets have lost $450 billion in value since Donald Trump was elected, says David Inglis. In Trump tantrum, emerging markets are down hard, but not yet out, says Holger. Very interesting piece I came across on Global Research about hybrid wars, strategies against Africa, Andrew Corribico. And he is interesting because he's picking on certain areas. Tinderbox of a locale is defined as the convergence area between the Chad, the CAR, Sudan, South Sudan, and it's marked by an array of interlinked involvement between state and non-state actors in each other's affairs. The next most conflict-prone area of regional overlap is the mountainous area that straddles the DRC, Uganda, Rwanda, and Burundi borders. After the end of the Second Congo War, Ugandan and Rwandan pro- and anti-government militia groups ended up controlling this part of the DRC and seizing the profitable mining deposits located there. Next, interregional conflict overlap in Africa deals with terrorist groups in the Sahara, in particular the interplay between transnational militant organizations operating in the broad expanse between Mali, Mauritania, Algeria, Niger, and Libya. The NATO war on Libya destroyed the most prosperous and stable state in Africa and was the catalyst for destabilizing the rest of the aforementioned states downstream via the newly opened weapon and militant channel that was created in the former Jamhuriya. Formerly part of the British Empire and administered together with Zambia and Zimbabwe as a member of the Central African Federation in the closing days of colonialism, Malawi is categorized as part of the Southern Cone sphere of regional influence because most of its international trade runs through Mozambique. The landlocked country is one of the world's poorest and least developed nations, and the state's dire poverty has created a situation where anti-government sentiment can be easily manipulated. While Malawi isn't directly a part of China's larger integrated Silk Road network in Africa, the two countries have quickly moved closer to one another economically over the past couple of years. Malawi's geopolitical position is such that any large-scale destabilization within the country's border could easily spread to Mozambique. But most important for the researchers' focus, it could also just as likely move northwards to Zambia and Tanzania. Zimbabwe, life after Bob, in many of the poorest African dictatorships of recent decades, the best paved road ran from the presidential palace to the airport, in case the big man and his entourage needed to escape in a hurry. That is still the case in Harare, where the president's cronies know that they are not universally popular. Some leading figures in ZANU-PF, the ruling party, are said to have shipped belongings abroad already. Some apparently keep bags packed for the moment that Robert Mugabe, the 92-year-old president, who has ruled for 36 years, keels over or is pushed aside in a palace coup. Others are said to be sleeping in different places every night to confound potential assassins or soldiers who think they might be sent to kill or arrest them. And I said in July 2016, countries like Zimbabwe feel they are right at the edge. The edge was described thus by Hunter S. Thompson. The edge, there is no honest way to explain it. because the only people who really know where it is are the ones who have gone over. Development Minister Gerd Müllers in Germany would in coming weeks release details of what he called a new Marshall Plan for Africa. If the youth of Africa can't find work or a future in their own countries, it won't be hundreds of thousands, but millions that make their way to Europe, he said. Kabila has performed a coup d'etat against himself by signing that agreement to delay elections because he made an oath to protect the constitution. This is Etienne Tshisekedi. Tshisekedi's political advisor Valentin Mubake said civil war was a predictable consequence of the government's delaying tactics. Elections are the only solution. Anything else will lead to war. The people will take to the streets. Kabila will kill 1 or 2 million of them, but he won't be able to kill 70 million, which was the point I was making previously. I'll put up a photograph of MONUSCO took when they went to visit President Kabila. Julian Paluku, governor of DRC's North Kivu province, said Ugandan authorities no longer knew the whereabouts of Sultani Makenga, who was the military chief of the M23 rebellion. There is a view that is going to stoke that up deliberately in order to say that, look, if I would go now, we're going to have an insurgency. ESCOM CEO, who I met when we hosted January Makamba at Mindspeak, Brian Molefe, is to step down following this Gupta graft report. He's the first casualty. Brian is the fallen angel for investors. Mobile phone records show Molefe called AJ Gupta 44 times from August last year through March, while Gupta called the ESCOM CEO 14 times, according to the report. South African all shares down 0.79% this year. Rand had its biggest weekly slump since August as bonds were dumped. Extended losses for a third day. Let's see how it plays out today. I'll put up a 6-month chart of the dollar rand, and really it's now trading on this pro-Trump zeitgeist and not on a perceived reducing of political risk. IMF board approves Egypt's $12 billion loan agreement. $2.75 billion has been dispersed. Polls can be fuzzy, says The Economist, but one conducted by Basira shows CC's approval rating dropping 14 points in the past 2 months. The Egyptian pound obviously was devalued and is now trading at 1661.20. Egyptian EGX30 has surged 55.82% year-to-date. Nigerian all share down 8.63% year-to-date. Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index down 15.82% year-to-date. Tallow, Total's Uganda oil exports face delays on infrastructure. This is Bloomberg. Unlikely to be exported as soon as the nation expects because the scale of the infrastructure projects required to transport the fuel out of the country. Uganda has an estimated 1.7 billion barrels of recoverable oil it fields in the Lake Albert Basin that the government expects Tullow, Total and China's CONOC to start pumping by 2021. Government has estimated it will receive $43 billion of revenue from the resource over 25 years. Hedge funds line up against Mozambique in tuna bond battle. Country's attempt to reach a restructuring agreement by the end of the year suffered a blow when a group of 5 investors who hold 60% of its $727 million Eurobond said the note should be treated differently from loans to 2 state companies, and talks couldn't begin until an IMF program was in place. I think they're a little bit of a buy, a bit of a nibble, notwithstanding Mozambique being in a very, very difficult place right now, no cash. But if you look out, you can probably restructure that bond, lower the coupon and get paid back. Mozambique Central Bank has ordered the closure of privately owned Nosso Banco, it said at the weekend, less than 2 months after a liquidity crunch and bailout of the Southern African nation's 4th largest bank, Mozambique. And then a very interesting piece about zombie banks. Depositors are afraid of placing deposits with zombie banks so they don't get funding to grow their bulk and grow out of the zombie loans. The zombie loans on the balance sheet prevent loans from new projects that will allow the country to grow. Kenya, Raymond said in Kenya the change in the interest rate caps meant that liquidity poured into Citigroup and away from smaller lenders which were deemed unstable. That's what I talked about in the flight to quality. Moody's has downgraded Shelter Afrique's long-term issuer rating from BA1 to BA3 and placed it on review for further downgrade. William Ruto's been traveling Africa, and let me put up a photograph of him with Ali Bongo. East African Portland Cement reported a full year profit after tax slumped 42.074%. Revenue was up marginally 5.39%. But the cement business served up a minus 5.84 billion shilling loss. The fair value or gain on investment property was 6.23 billion, and that meant they could report a profit. But if it was credible, you wouldn't be trading on a P of less than 1. Kenya Wall Street says another scandal, East African Portland Cement. Have a look at his link. Williamson Tea reported a first half loss after tax of 263 million shillings. Turnover was up 13% due to higher crops, but they're saying higher crops throughout tea growing areas depressed prices to very low levels, last seen briefly in 2014. Cost of production continues to rise, which when coupled with low prices has resulted in a loss. They are saying in June 2016 an industrial court judgment awarded over 50% wage and benefit increases to our workers for years 2014 and 15. Award was challenged by the tea industry and is awaiting judgment by the Court of Appeal. The unknown outcome of the next judgment adds considerably to the uncertainty of the next 6 months. In short, they say the outlook is gloomy. But I can never remember a time when they haven't said it's gloomy, even when they made a big profit. I think you buy it on dips. The net asset value is a multiple of the share price, notwithstanding the earnings dip. Put up a photograph of plucking tea on the Williamson Tea estate. Kachoria Tea reported a first half loss after tax of 89.686 million shillings. Turnover was up more dramatically, 29%, but they were gloomy again. Just taking something like Kachoria, the net asset value is 272, the share price is 82. And in fact, I think the net asset value is much more than that. Nairobi all shares down 3.91% this year. The NSE 20 is down 19.22% this year. But let me finish off with the fact that I think the dollar's going to rally big, real big. It's time to get on it.